Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Saturday Night Live, featuring the lovely and gracious E Train back at the home studio. Uh,
Yes,
and
I
I'm,
am.
I'm Clay. We're glad to be with y'all tonight. Hope
We were
everybody is doing well.
we were not waiting on Ellen. We were waiting on Clay.
We were waiting on Ellen when Clay got back.
I had to move my cake. That's all. I didn't say wait.
You
Y'all
did
know we
say
love to
wait.
give you. I didn't mean like wait. You know that we like to give each other shit about who's making who run late. So it's part of the
But it
thing.
is good. But it is good to be back. And just sitting here laughing at some of the comments. Um, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to hearing from the experts. And honestly, I think one of the reasons why I picked the two cases is one wasn't as highly publicized, even though I think it's kind of an interesting case, and the other one was very highly publicized. Everybody that was watching TV back then has an opinion on it. So hopefully it'll be a fun and interesting night.
Yeah, and 5,000 degrees. Do you mean like it's 85? I know that's hot for that area for LA.
It is a little
It
bit
was.
cooler here on the coast. It was
Mhm.
nice. Very nice. I hope it sticks around and doesn't get severe on us. So far, cross our fingers, we've been lucky. There really been no storms forming or anything. The water's starting to cool along the equatorial line and area. And that's probably a help in preventing, large storms from forming.
Mhm. It's insane. How hot is it, Melissa? Come on, because it's like typically in the summer here, it's like in mid to upper 90s and
right,
humid as it can possibly be.
right now, it shows 97 degrees.
In LA,
Yeah.
it can't be
So
humid though.
that's
It was
that's pretty warm. Now they don't have the humidity.
they
It
don't.
was
Yeah.
106. You don't have the humidity, so you're missing that part of the fun, but
Oh yeah.
106 is pretty warm.
And when you open the door and it feels like a brick wall of humidity hits you in the face and you cannot breathe, that's a toughie.
I remember when I was calling on California, I was in Lodi, hat tip to Credence, and had to make a phone call. I was in long sleeves, tie, and was finding a payphone because back then you didn't have the cell phones. And I was in a payphone sitting there talking and looked across the street at a bank, and it had the temperature 103 degrees. And I'd been talking on the phone for several minutes. If I'd have been in Alabama at 103, my shirt would have been soaked. But I wasn't even breaking a sweat
Mhm.
in at 103 just because of the humidity difference. So, but if you're, it's over 90 in our kitchen.
Don't y'all have air conditioning? Come on now.
Ellen would die.
I would die.
She would
Um,
die.
yes, I would be laying on the floor getting treats for dinner. No food being cooked for you, GB. No way. That is when the solar cooker is very helpful because it will not raise the temperature in your house. Just saying.
And think of all the electricity you can save.
Mhm.
We need to get that back up too.
Jane and I think we're going to redo it. We've talked about it.
Do you? Okay. Well, that'd be
Hmm.
cool.
That way, it's not all the interruptions and breaks and such.
Yeah. And you've got, second time you do it, it's probably a little smoother. You've got a little bit better idea of what you want to do and how you want to do it. So, there are two going in the main room, and we live in a small studio apartment. The building has no insulation.
Oof. Ouch.
When it's usually 75, it's not really something you think about.
True.
So everyone, welcome tonight. We're going in a little bit different direction, and it's good to see the encouragement some of you posted. Greatly appreciated. But tonight we're going to delve into what I've titled Fatal Finances. a live stream where we kind of delve into the dark side of wealth and relationships. I'll even ask my class what are. Oh, Ellen wants to brag.
The caramel cake, by the way, was so worth the wait. It is fabulous. I'm going to have a bite.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if y'all don't remember, Ellen had a birthday about a month
Month
ago,
ago.
and she was out of town when the cake arrived. So it's been in the freezer chilling and waiting for her to be able to come back and grab a bite. So
Yeah, the good news is they send it frozen, they have it wrapped up perfectly. So it is so delicious. Mm.
She adores this cake. She does. She
I
really
do.
does.
And I get it once a year, and it's just like the best. I will, thank you. I usually eat like the whole thing within a week by myself because Clay hates caramel. Yeah. So there's that. Thank you.
Yeah, it
All
is
right.
just too sugary for
Mm-mm.
me.
Steak card is still sitting here. That's okay. It's not a problem. It can be a
It'll
Christmas card.
save it for next year.
Yeah,
Save the money.
either way. Mhm. Of course, stamps
All
might
right.
be stupid expensive by next year. We don't know.
Yeah. We got a lot to cover, so let me go ahead and try to get started. I might have bitten off more than I can chew, but we'll see how it goes. We're exploring two cases, two really tragic cases where financial gain was kind of intersected with murder.
Mm.
Everybody waved Ellen.
No, I couldn't speak. I had cake. Hi, Erwin.
Hey, Erwin, how you doing, man?
That's what the wave was for. Sorry, I'm interrupt you. I was just
That's all right. And forgive my manners. I didn't say hey to everybody else. Melissa, Jane, Dogs. Don't know who else is possibly lurking out there, but if you're out there, drop us a comment so we can say, hey, appreciate y'all joining us.
we actually
So,
got the sky, and now we're back to dogs. Dag nabbit.
oh, did it start off with Sky?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Either way. These two cases, Jocelyn Earnest and Laci Peterson, were examples of what most people would initially consider relatively ordinary marriages that were ultimately shattered by deceit, greed, ultimately murder.
That's cute.
You definitely have an interesting personality, however many different moods it takes. I don't know if I want to say it's multiple personality, but we love you.
Oh, Clay knows I have lots of them, so it's okay.
Ellen has a lot of moods, but they're all part of her delicate and joyous personality, especially when she's eating cake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to consider, what was it? Was the murder, purely for financial gain? Were there deeper, darker motives? Did the accused actually do the murders? So we're going to take a look. The first story takes us to Forest, Virginia, small town where everybody knew everybody. Earnest, I always want to call him Ernest, but the Ernest appeared to be just another happy couple. Jocelyn was a bright, successful woman. She had a warm personality, according to friends and family, a very strong work ethic. She had moved up in her professional life and a promising career. Her husband, Wesley, was equally driven, working as a high school administrator. And they seemed pretty much like a perfect match. Very happy, both ambitious, both focused on their careers. But behind closed doors, things were not what they seemed. Wesley and Jocelyn's marriage started out like many others, filled with hope and promise. We all, when we first get married, we have expectations of nothing but great times ahead.
That's where we
But
all
over
go
time,
wrong.
yeah. But over time, cracks begin to show. Actually, in this relationship, financial stress was a constant issue. Even though they both had two good jobs and, relatively good income for the time, Wesley, Wesley actually was the one with the expensive taste, fancy cars, big houses, and he would overspend what the couple's finances would allow. Just they couldn't keep up. Jocelyn was the one that was more cautious with money. As their financial struggles grew, then obviously so did the tension between them. I tell my students, my classes, ask them what are the three biggest problems that couples have, and the first one is money. The biggest problem most couples have is money, and if there's money problems, there's going to be marital problems. And
Mhm.
then, kind of on top of the money issues, you had the uh, matter of Wesley's infidelity. Yeah, he had expensive taste along with the side chicks, and he'd been cheating on Jocelyn for years. Now, it was a fact she discovered kind of gradually. Obviously, noticed some suspicious behavior over time and found some hidden receipts. Their arguments became more and more frequent, more heated. And even her friends recalled seeing her withdrawn. Remember, described her as rather, outgoing and personable. But during this time, she became much more withdrawn. The spark in her eyes just dimmed. And despite all this, Wesley took out a substantial life insurance policy, about $1 million
On her.
on her. So was this indications that he had a plan in motion?
Ding, ding, ding.
Maybe, maybe not. Well,
Play.
in this, see, why didn't she leave? She had no kids. I think all of this happened relatively fast. I don't have exact timelines, but by the time she found out, she did start to file for divorce. So this actually was during the time when the divorce was proceeding. So in December of 2007, Jocelyn was found dead in her home. The scene was kind of disturbing. Jocelyn was, lying on the floor, a gun beside her, and a suicide note nearby. Now, first glance, it, appeared to be a suicide. But to the investigators, things just didn't add up. The note, for example, seemed kind of off. It sounded more like a script than it was a suicide note. Now, I kind of, forgot to mention that.
Hang on, Sky, real quick.
Let's see, during a divorce, that is the most dangerous time for a woman.
I
Pat
agree.
Brown, criminal profiler quote. Emotions are the highest. They're both competing for the remaining assets. There's some vengeance involved. There's just a lot of, it's a hostile proceeding. And, a lot of times the nature of the proceeding will make it even more hostile. Trying to,
Well, that,
blame each other.
yeah, one of my divorce attorneys, God, said that some of the best people you'll ever meet become the most awful, hateful people during a divorce.
Yeah. It just, the nature of the proceeding will bring out the worst in people. It does. It's dangerous for a man too. Now here you see a picture of the side chick, Shamika Wright. Now, Wesley married Jocelyn in 1995. but started seeing Shamika somewhere around early in 2007. Told Shamika he was worth $5 million. But he was still working, said he didn't need to work, but he was still working because he loved it. Obviously, Jocelyn found out over time, and she filed for divorce in 2006 after 3 relatively unhappy years. She was killed a few months later. Now, investigators quickly began to suspect that this wasn't a suicide at all. Talked about the note, the positioning, the nature of the note, all pointed to something far more sinister. But who would want to kill Jocelyn, and why? Obviously, the husband is the first one. Statistics show the husband's the most likely candidate, so suspicion immediately goes to the husband. And even his behavior.
Don't they have to rule out the people closest to you to begin with, just so they can focus on anybody else?
Well, generally, if it's murder, it's going to be somebody close to you. And so, trying to rule out those closest to you is the obvious course. And Wesley, after his death, according to, friends, family, the police, he seemed more concerned with the insurance payout than mourning his wife. Part of the thinking of the police or whatever is that Wesley thought he had laid it out perfectly and, concealed everything. He had an alibi. The staged suicide scene was meant to throw off investigators, and thought he had laid it out perfectly. But there were some kinks in the plan. First one was
wait. Who's Marcy Shepard?
Apparently, during this time, there was an allegation, or one of the witnesses, Marcy Shepard, one of the prosecution's witnesses, who was testifying about her state of mind and attitude and, what all was going on at the time, actually admitted that she and Jocelyn kissed 3 times. Now, according to Marcy, they were beginning a relationship before she was killed. According to the prosecutor, this is kind of in Marcy's mind. Marcy had a big crush on her. So honestly, we don't know. Obviously, Jocelyn's not around to tell her side. But just some additional intrigue. Did Wesley know? Did he find out? Did that enrage him that Jocelyn was having a fling? How many times have we seen where guys think it's okay for them to have a relationship outside of marriage, but not the woman? It's not, what do you call it? Not treason, but not traitorous. It's not betraying the marriage relationship if the guy does it, but it is in their minds if the girl does it, if the woman does it.
Okay.
Just talking about historically how some men think.
Okay.
They think it's okay for them to cheat, but not for the wife to cheat. And if the wife cheats, that can enrage them. So my point is, did Wesley find out about this supposed fling or relationship? Did that infuriate him? Don't really know.
Thank you, Sky.
Talked about how, some things didn't match up. For example, the gun was found on top of Jocelyn's arm on her coat, which, if you investigate enough suicides, when the gun goes off, there is a jerking reaction, and the gun will usually be flung away. It won't just drop neatly on your lap. It won't be held in the hands. And it, likely won't fall and stay on top of your arm.
And some people call that a kick.
Yeah. There are just some things that look improbable, that look staged. Also, as I mentioned already, his behavior was a little weird. Now, the letter, looking at the letter apparently had two fingerprints which matched Wesley, none of Jocelyn. So, how did she pick up a paper, put it down, grab the pen, write it? It was found across the room. So, how did she get it across the room without, fingerprints? That's just kind of interesting. You don't see that very often. James Fitzgerald, former FBI forensics handwriting expert, actually worked on the Kaczynski case. Anybody know who Ted Kaczynski is?
The Unabomber.
The Unabomber that comes out of, long ago and far away. Well, he had retired. He was working in private business. He testified that he did not believe that Jocelyn wrote the letter. It was just too inconsistent with 250 other letters that he had access to, her journals, her emails, letters that she had written to friends and family. It focused on some odd aspects. Particularly, interesting to him was the use of the family instead of using a pronoun such as his or her. Here's the letter. Mom, I just can't take it anymore.
Wait, that's not the letter. That's a typed out version?
Yeah, but here's the
Okay.
the
Gotcha.
writing of the
The
letter.
context of the letter. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Or
I
content.
just can't take it anymore. I've tried so hard to be strong, but it is too hard to continue. The ups and downs are too much to deal with. I keep trying to appear as though I'm doing fine, but the bad days are so overwhelming and lonely. My new love will never leave the family. The family. My new love. The family. Wes has buried us in debt, and starting over is too much. I'm so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry, everyone. Jocelyn.
Let me ask you this, though. I didn't think that life insurance paid for suicides.
If it's been in effect for 2 years, it will.
Okay, well, then here's a question.
When did he buy the insurance policy on her life? That is a good question. Don't know offhand. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Seahawks soar together.
Yeah.
It does. I know there are some suicide clauses in some policies. Life insurance is sticky with that sometimes. So sometimes if there's any suicide, forget it. You can get back what you've already paid into it.
Yeah, I think in most states the law is that has a 2-year maximum life. That if the suicide occurs after 2 years, that the insurance company has to pay. Wesley Earnest purchased the life insurance on Jocelyn in 2005. This became a key point of interest in the investigation of her death in 2007.
Because that was 2 years.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So good question.
No bickering.
Gee, since I bought one on Sky 15 years ago.
And how much was the policy for, Clay?
$1 million.
$1 million. All right, there we go.
Which, remember, this is 2005. That's not an insignificant amount now. But that was hella not an insignificant amount then.
Next time I'm going to have Clay send all of you one.
Yeah.
And we can all eat it together. Because it's a very inexpensive cake, right, Clay?
Yeah. So Fitzgerald, the FBI, is sitting here reading her other letters, and said, this just doesn't fit. Some things are just weird. She talks about, my new love will never leave her family. Well, instead of her family, she says the family. That's weird phrasing. Fitzgerald described this possibly as an effort to make the letter seem more authentic by a fabricator who did not know the identity of the other woman at all. Don't know. Or did not know the identity of the fling. Just knew or suspected she was having a fling, found out she was having a fling, didn't know who. And so instead of saying his or her, left it thee. Said the letter, also Fitzgerald talking about, Jocelyn's writing style, he said this letter was too short, too concise, too direct. In describing Jocelyn's writing style, he described her as a prolific, emotional writer who never shied from naming names. The reference to financial problems was also unusual. She never talked about her personal finances in previous correspondence, to close friends, to family, whatever. But the
I'm
police
sorry, my
weren't
nose.
convinced.
I keep scratching my nose. It just, I don't know what is.
That's all right.
I apologize.
So the police, read the note, weren't comfortable with it, thought it sounded a little bit too stilted. They, continued digging. They found out about the deteriorating marriage, Wesley's affair, his mounting debt, and it became pretty clear that Jocelyn's death wasn't just a tragic accident. They became convinced it was murder. Now, the real question was, could they prove it? Well, they arrested Wesley. Jocelyn was killed in 2007, so his trial began in 2010. And it pretty quickly became clear this was no ordinary case. The prosecution laid out a rather damning case against Wesley. They argued that he killed Jocelyn for the life insurance money, obviously, money he desperately needed to cover his debts, fund his lavish lifestyle. They presented the evidence that the suicide note itself was forged, and Wesley had pretty much staged the entire scene. But the defense was ready. They painted Wesley as a grieving husband, devastated by his wife's death, which is kind of interesting because most people didn't notice that about him. They attacked the credibility of the prosecution's evidence, suggesting obviously that the police rushed to judgment. And they claimed, which was true, there was no direct proof Wesley pulled the trigger. And then you've got the courtroom drama. At one point, the defense tried to introduce some new evidence, last-minute documents that supposedly exonerated Wesley. Well, the prosecution jumps up and claims the documents also are forged, just like the suicide note. The judge ruled in favor of the prosecution, and the evidence was excluded. And that was a pretty critical blow to the defense. Wesley also tried to introduce an expert to counter the state's fingerprinting evidence. He argued the fingerprints were not his. His fingerprints were not on the gun, and there was no incriminating DNA at the scene.
Yeah, but hers weren't either on the gun. Duh.
Nope. Which is kind of fascinating, kind of hard to explain. Well, the court refused. We don't have the initial trial documents, but what we do have is the opinion of an appeals court when this particular aspect or decision was appealed. And it has some interesting information or highlights in it. For example, look, and this is the decision of the appeals court. Wesley contends the trial erred in refusing to allow Dr. Jennifer Munkin to testify as an expert witness in fingerprint methodology, and in refusing to allow Dr. Munkin to offer an opinion contradicting the testimony of expert witnesses for the Commonwealth. We affirm the judgment of the trial court.
Can you say her name one more time?
Munkin.
Again? I just
Ellen.
think it's funny. I'm sorry. It's a weird name.
You don't see MNOO too often.
Munkin, whatever. You said it perfectly. I'm learning.
Let's see. And here's, where we found out that the gun was lying on her coat. Officers recovered a firearm lying on the sleeve of the coat she was wearing. They also found a typewritten note located several feet from the body. Doesn't say whether it was on the floor or desk or bed or whatever, but still a note that was several feet away with none of her prints on it. The victim's fingerprints were not found on the note. However, Kenneth Riding, a forensic scientist who specialized in analyzing latent fingerprints, testified 2 latent fingerprints found on the notes were Earnest fingerprints. Now, Earnest tendered Dr. Munkin as an expert witness in finger identification methods and the history and the use of fingerprint identification methods. The Commonwealth objected, arguing that Dr. Munkin was not a fingerprint examiner and should not be permitted to opine regarding the analysis. Upon voir dire to determine her qualifications, Dr. Munkin testified she has an undergraduate degree in social science, a law degree, and a PhD on the history and social study of science and technology. She teaches evidence at the UCLA School of Law.
Clay, I'm only going to correct you because we have a lot of people from law.
Sure.
Here, it's voir dire, apparently.
Okay, fair enough. She stated, the appeals court goes on, she stated she was acquainted with the comparisons conducted in Earnest's case, but she testified, I am not a fingerprint examiner and would not ever make a statement about whether or not 2 prints did or did not match. That is outside of my expertise. So right there, she admits she can't comment on whether or not the prints matched or not. She also acknowledged she had never performed a fingerprint analysis. So Earnest proffered that Dr. Munkin would testify that there was no statistical or clinical basis for the claim that a partial latent fingerprint can be matched to a known fingerprint using the methods testified to by the Commonwealth's fingerprint witnesses. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The trial court ruled the expert witness testimony would be admissible if offered by a qualified expert who could testify regarding the methodology. The methodology here is key, employed by the particular case, or has an opinion as to the particular analysis. Again, ultimately, the methodology conducted by the Commonwealth's experts who have testified, or an expert who has independently conducted his or her own examination. It held that despite Dr. Munkin's extensive education and expertise in certain areas, she was not qualified as an expert in the field of fingerprint analysis. So it noted that it appeared the purpose of her testimony was to discuss other cases and studies which would involve inadmissible hearsay. Earnest sought to refute Johnson's testimony, the state's fingerprint expert, when he stated, nobody has ever found 2 different individuals on the planet with the same fingerprint.
Fair.
He proffered he wanted to question Dr. Munkin about an unrelated incident referred to at trial as the Mayfield case. The trial court ruled that discussion of the Mayfield case would be rejected as hearsay. So the court, The judge continues on. She says her expertise lay in academic evaluation of various studies of fingerprint analysis. That's different than expertise of fingerprint analysis. That's a subtle but important distinction.
She knows about fingerprint analysis. She knows that there's never been two fingerprints that were alike. Just because she didn't look at them doesn't mean the person that did is wrong.
Well, she wanted to testify that it is possible that two different fingerprints from individuals are alike. Yeah. It was the state's witness that said no two fingerprints are alike that anybody has ever discovered. So she was going to get into kind of talk about some statistical or theoretical studies that indicate that it's possible there's fingerprints that are alike on different individuals.
Yeah, screw her. We don't like her. Sorry.
Yeah, the court goes on and says, talking about Munkin, would have merely have addressed generally the statistical or clinical basis for the assertion that a latent fingerprint can be matched to a known fingerprint. That an unknown fingerprint can be matched to a known fingerprint from somebody.
All right, we got a couple things.
Okay. Did husband discover wife lesbian relationship when? Don't know exactly. Don't have data on that. How long before suicide or murder? This all happened within, a month or two of being murdered. They were only together 3 times, according to Macy's testimony. So it would be just shortly before the murder. Lawyer hired wrong expert for the accused. Yeah, they were desperate, trying to find something to discredit the state's evidence. Just didn't have a whole lot of options. Why didn't he just put her fingerprints on the note once she was dead? That's a good question. For somebody who thinks that they thought of everything, don't know.
Okay, and I'm sorry, y'all, if I look like I'm nuts over here, but Clay started breeding fruit flies when I was gone, and I've got one that's escaped to my bedroom, and I'm trying to kill it. So if I slap something real hard, it's not Tourette's, I promise. I'm just trying to kill a fruit fly.
Actually, we had them before she left, and I have killed hundreds. I actually got a little vacuum and started sucking them up when they would land on something. Pretty much almost got them all gone. There's still a few stragglers around, but.
Y'all, they freaked me out. I had to breed these things in high school for AP biology, DNA, and all that crap. I can't stand those things. They were everywhere. You can't stop them from continuing to do their thing.
They are irritating. And if we leave windows or doors open, they're small enough they can come through the screen. So like when you have a cool day and you want the windows open, kind of let the house air out, it's a chance you take.
Okay, like so many, he thought he was the smartest person in the. Yeah, exactly, Melissa. People who commit crimes tend to think they are untouchable and typically very narcissistic, in my opinion.
They consistently overestimate their talent and or influence/power.
And I'll say, Melissa, fruit flies like white wine.
Those are like white wine.
We've done apple cider vinegar.
We've done wine before. Put it in a little ramekin.
And dish soap. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it reduces the tension on the water.
Gotcha. Yeah. They just slide right in.
Yep.
I'm gonna get him. He keeps flying by me. He won't leave me alone.
All right. So the court also notes in this decision that Earnest did not object to the admission of Jotman's statements, but he elicited a cross-examination that Johnson had read only sections of the report. According to Earnest's proffer, the most Dr. Munkin could have stated was she knew of no documentation supporting Johnson's assertions. So she couldn't prove it was wrong. She just could say, I don't know of anything that verifies that he's correct. That would have been hearsay. So the ultimate, we affirm the judgment of the trial court. The ultimate decision of the appeals court was that Earnest, quote unquote, expert was an expert in a lot of things, just couldn't say anything pertinent to the case or that was relevant to the facts of the case because she wasn't competent to comment on the facts of the case. She could just quote, or cite data from other studies, none of which were specific to this case. So we don't have the actual documents from the initial case. This is really the only thing I could find online. I presume the documents have been sealed due to, family concerns or issues or whatever. But there was some interesting information that I figured some people may not have heard or seen before. Erwin, weird how he bought life insurance and his wife without any knowledge of her adultery, which happened 1.78 years later. That it begs the question, was he already plotting her murder and waiting the 2 years?
That's my guess.
I can't disagree. But can't prove it either. This is a picture of the house.
Which house?
In the house Jocelyn was murdered in. Jocelyn and Wesley's house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was sitting atop a hill, beautiful house overlooking the valley down below. The Mount Lake house, as it's referred to, and it caught fire. No evidence or indications or of arson. Haven't seen anything on the potential causes. Wesley was actually out on bond awaiting trial, so this was a month or two before the trial. And at the time, the property was valued at $1.2 million. He had actually tried to sell it earlier and listed it at $2.9 million. But remember, this is in 2009.
I wonder if that was for his girlfriend. Like, oh, my property is worth $3 and then I've got blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think that could have been. I think also the subprime crisis, housing values just absolutely fell like a rock in late 2008, 2009.
Yes.
And so, so by the time he was able to list it, get it appraised, try to collect the insurance on it. Because remember, the life insurance was being held up because he was out on bail, in a suspected murder of Jocelyn.
Right.
So he had no money coming in. So, torch the house, get the $1.2 million. House was a total loss. Both of them had wanted the house in the divorce proceedings. Obviously, that issue was resolved.
Okay, I'm going to go get some apple cider vinegar and some soap. Hang on.
Y'all have inspired Ellen, so we will let y'all know how that turns out. Now, in the end, the jury found Wesley guilty of first-degree murder. The fingerprints were obviously critical, but there was also some other information that had been entered into testimony. The fact was that her body had been moved after she was shot. The investigator during the trial testified, we found a couple of items in the bedroom. We found a condom package lying by the bed. We found a condom unwrapped in the trash can. It's almost as if someone had attempted to make it look like a sexual assault or some kind of love affair gone wrong. And on the other end of the house, it was made to appear like a suicide. Now, the forensic test determined Earnest's fingerprints were not on the gun. His DNA was nowhere to be found at the scene. Apparently, they were separated. He was not living at the house anymore. And they believe Jocelyn was shot sometime between 7:30 and 9 p.m., the night before her body had been moved. That's interesting. There is no way she could have moved herself. Investigator replied, "There's no question the body had been moved by someone and a pretty strong someone. We found a couple of items in the bedroom. I already talked about that. And another fact was that the heat in the home had been cranked up. The heat in the home was overwhelming. Thermostat had been jacked up to 90 degrees. The home itself appeared rather untidy, according to testimony, but there was no signs of forced entry. And her black lab, Rufus, was discovered locked in his crate in her bedroom without food or water. Neighbors and family testified she would never, ever, ever lock up her dog and turn the heat up, knowing that her dog could be in there and die in that cage. So question for y'all, why was the heat turned up? Anybody know? Some of y'all are LawTube folks. Some of y'all forensic types, forensic experts. Why do you think the heat would be turned up to 90? And that's significant. Had to be basically after she was killed. Because before you commit suicide, the last thing you think about is, yeah, I want to turn the thermostat up and bake my dog. Melissa, to mess with the time of death. Erwin, to preserve the body. Jane, to mask the time of death. All good guesses. When I researched this a little bit, because I've had my suspicions, but found a couple things. One, the heat accelerates decomposition. This could, as some of you suggested, obscure the time of death and make it more difficult for forensics to pinpoint exactly when she was killed. And then two, obviously, to conceal the crime. By speeding up composition, any forensic evidence that could link Wesley to the crime may be degraded or destroyed. The body's condition would obviously be found in much worse shape, and that could possibly erase signs of struggle or specific injuries that could indicate murder rather than suicide. So, changing the heat, that's pretty much a deliberate act. Trying to tamper with the evidence, trying to confuse investigators, forensics, the autopsy, aligning with the overall efforts to make the death look like a suicide rather than a murder. But to me, this is the poorest construction of attempting to make a suicide look like a murder that I could imagine. The investigators also testified that Jocelyn chronicled her feelings in her journal, in her notebooks. And one entry she made about 6 months before she was killed says, "If I die, Wesley killed me and he probably shot me." The investigator was asked by the prosecution, "What did you think when you read that?" The investigator, Bab, stated, "I thought she got it right." That's pretty telling. So the jury was given instructions, sent off to deliberate. Anybody want to guess on how long it took them? What would you think a short jury deliberation time is? Because when a jury is, convened, they've already voted for a foreman, but they go over the rules, they review the evidence, and then, they can take the first vote. We've got 2 hours, we've got under an hour, we've got another hour. It was 3 hours, which when you consider having to go through the entirety of the transcripts and reconsider, reconsider all the evidence. But I thought 3 hours was pretty quick considering what all they had to do. Sometimes it's shocking how long they take. You think sometimes it would be a relatively straightforward decision. That's kind of the beautiful thing of watching some of these trials in detail, because you'll form your own opinion or thoughts, guilty or innocent or whatever, and you probably almost already have an opinion before you even go to vote.
How long was the trial?
Don't know. So, sorry, Ellen just popped in and asked me a question. Asked how long was the trial? I don't know exactly in terms of days. But they had their decision in 3 hours. The jury was convinced, seeing the evidence, Wesley's conduct, his comments, they saw it all as compelling. Apparently, there was no doubt. They just had to go through the procedures, take the first vote, found Wesley guilty. He was sentenced by the judge to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And, I'm sure the verdict brought some closure to Jocelyn's family. He was sentenced actually to life, but life plus 3 years. Kind of interesting little side note. He was given life without parole for the murder, and then 3 years for the use of a firearm in the commission of the crime. So, kind of an interesting process. The jury found it was premeditated. The jury voted on the life sentence. Felt like the staging of the crime to make it appear as a suicide was just damning enough to eliminate any chance of parole. And after the trial, there wasn't a whole lot of comment by the jurors, but the foreman did make a comment and stated that the jury was confident and had no doubts about the correctness of the verdict. Now, that seems pretty straightforward. But there is, some contrary view or information. This is a site I found, Jim Fisher True Crime. And he goes through and he kind of details, some of the circumstances. And he ends up summing it up. No one saw, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. No one saw Wesley Earnest enter the house and shoot his wife. No one claimed he had confided to them he had committed the crime. And he never confessed to the police. All the prosecutor had was what looked like a staged suicide, a motive, and a pair of latent prints on a suspect's suicide note. But with the two juries, the prosecution had enough evidence to convict. The second jury being the appeals court, the 3-judge panel. So when you think about it, when it's put like that, you kind of got to wonder. Erwin, did the accused testify at trial? No, I don't think he did. And when you think about it, even though you may not like the guy and you may suspect the guy, could you have doubts beyond a reasonable doubt? All the prosecutor had was a staged suicide, a motive, and a pair of latent prints on a suspect's suicide note.
I mean, and that probably would have been enough for me. Sorry, but
no, it just, as I was going through this, I thought, yeah, he's guilty. And then I read that paragraph and it makes me think, the prosecution really didn't have they didn't have any evidence that Wesley did it. His notes I mean, his, two partial prints on a piece of paper. That was ultimately what convicted him, I think. That and his attitude.
Well, I mean, if he wasn't there, then how did his prints get on the note?
If somebody went to this effort to stage the crime, they could have, been out somewhere, met him, handed him a paper and thought, and actually handed him the back of this paper, 2 pages, and then go, oh, sorry, this is just scrap. And then gave him the letter or whatever was to be brought to his attention. Or
Okay,
they
but
could have
then
taken a piece of paper off his desk.
okay, then but his were the only prints found on the paper.
Yes.
So,
But does that prove he murdered her?
but I'm not saying it does, but can you find a motive for anybody else to kill her?
Don't know all the facts.
Not his girlfriend, clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what all she had done in her life, who she offended, who, whatever. I don't know. I think he
Okay.
did it,
hmm I think so
but
too.
in looking at the evidence or the lack of evidence, could I, beyond, shadow of a reasonable doubt, say that he did it? No. There's always someone who doesn't like the verdict and who writes a book or something for publicity. True. Jane, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it must be a duck.
Quack, quack.
Accused friend or family member could have done it for husband or hired killer. And that's kind of always my concern in a murder trial and conviction. If somebody is wrongly convicted, and we've seen through history that people have been wrongly convicted, it happens. But if somebody is wrongly convicted, not only are the innocent being punished, but the guilty is getting away scot-free. So that's kind of a two-edged sword. No, he may not have lived there then, but that piece of paper could have been in the house when he did live there. Another good point. I would really love to watch this trial.
Was it televised? I guess not. Not back
No.
then.
Yeah, this was really before court TV was up and
No, I was
running.
just thinking. I mean, even the Menendez brothers, theirs was televised.
Yeah. And some states didn't allow it at the time.
True.
And the Innocent Project would help him if they believed in him, and so far they are not bothering. But he didn't get a death sentence, and that's usually when the Innocent Project jumps on. I just think they simply don't have the resources to take on every convicted murderer. Not guilty since only 85% certain, need 98% certainty. I'm kind of with you. Like I say, I think he did it, but can I say that I believe so with that beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt? And I can't. There's a reasonable doubt in my mind.
Well, that's kind of like the Alec Murdaugh trial, where did the prosecution prove their case? No, they didn't. Could he be guilty? Probably. I mean, he may have been involved, may have known what was going on, may have had some, sorry, darn nose, some idea what was going on, or may have been told about it, whatever. But did the prosecution prove it? No. I don't think so.
Every time I hear the Murdaugh case, I think simply of the guy who is a supposed forensics ballistics expert.
God. Kenny Kinsey.
Yeah, that guy. I watched his testimony. At the time, I was screaming at the TV because he was trying to estimate the slope. He didn't know how to use the equipment, and he doesn't even know how to calculate the slope of a line.
he couldn't calculate the
Yeah.
simplest fucking math problem. 2 plus 2 equals 5. There you go.
His whole testimony was just bullshit. And
Hmm.
I'm amazed that the prosecution didn't pick up on that.
You mean the
Anyway,
defense?
the defense, sorry. Yeah, the
It's
defense.
okay.
How he got certified as an expert, no idea.
Oh, and they made him like the king of the case. His whole
Yeah.
testimony was the reason that, he was guilty. Anyway. All right.
Yep. Maybe need to do an excerpt, pull out his testimony, and then do
And
another little video on that.
and go through all the reasons that he's wrong.
Yeah.
Better to acquit than convict an innocent person. I agree.
He's as innocent as every adulterer. He is guilty of adultery. Nobody questions that. But does that make him guilty of murder? Better to acquit 10 murders than to convict one innocent person. I tend to agree. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of one issue I have with the courts. It seems like things have gotten so complicated that we're more interested in process, that process is more important than the actual evidence. Evidence can be excluded. And we'll see some of that in the next case, the Peterson. We'll see, and it seems like so much depends on the possible time, effort, resources, competence of the attorneys, both the prosecution and the defense. In the OJ case, even watching, I was pretty certain that OJ was guilty. But the case the prosecution put on was horrible, particularly when they tried to get him to put on the glove. One, that was stupid.
Well, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah. Now, I did see some jurors say that, they thought he was guilty, but they still voted to acquit just because of the Rodney King deal. So, if they'd have had a completely unbiased jury, you don't know how that would have turned out. So, maybe I'm a little too harsh on the prosecution, but I thought that they did overall an amazingly inefficient or weak job. Looking at the aftermath, Wesley is still behind bars, serving at Augusta Correctional in Virginia. His appeals, 3 or 4 different times, have been unsuccessful. He continues to maintain his innocence. His family has tried to, Jocelyn's family has since tried to move on as best they can. I'm sure the pain still lingers. But it's to me kind of a fascinating case, or a good example of how greed can corrupt, turning love into something deadly. Like I say, I do kind of believe he did it. He's got the motive. He's got the means.
Opportunity.
He's got the opportunity. Even if there's...
Alexa, hush.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. Take a look at the help section in your Alexa app.
I'm good.
Can we just... Yes, Ellen has planted bugs in the house so that Amazon can listen to everything. The one who's concerned most about Big Brother plants the bugs. Anyway, it's kind of funny. Like I say, I think he did it. But I do have to admit, there's very thin evidence. There's zero evidence directly linking him to it. Most of the evidence is somewhat circumstantial, which doesn't mean you can't find somebody guilty. But again, it's
harder.
It's harder for me. OJ was so guilty, it was a joke. And OJ was found civilly responsible and ordered to pay millions, but acquitted criminally. Yeah, I still remember he, swore to give his life to try to find her killer. And so far on all the golf courts and everything he was on, he didn't have any luck. He finally was Yeah, it was ridiculous, nonetheless.
Mhm.
So that is the Wesley and Jocelyn Earnest case. Now, the next case
You guys know all about.
is probably what most of you are familiar with. Laci and Scott Peterson. This was one of the most publicized trials, we've ever seen. Captured the nation's attention. I mean, here, Laci was an all-American girl. He was kind of a all-American guy. They were beautiful / handsome. They were seemingly a great match. She was noted as kind and more, also to give it some additional color, she was pregnant. She was expecting her first child with
She was
Scott.
very pregnant, like
She was
days
very
from.
pregnant. She was about 7 or 8 months pregnant.
Mhm.
I think 7 months.
Was
To
it?
outsiders, they seemed like a perfect couple. Laci devoted much of her energy towards being the perfect housewife. I mean, she enjoyed cooking, entertaining. Her favorite TV show was Martha Stewart, which kind of rings a bell close to home because that also was my sister's favorite, when she was first married.
That makes so much sense to me.
What?
She is like your sister. She's like the perfect
Somewhat.
homemaker
Yeah.
human.
Yeah. So this case just kind of, reverberate closely to me. They lived in a nice little home in Modesto, California, eagerly awaiting the birth of their son. She had already named him Connor. But once again, between this beautiful, warm, happy exterior, there were some very dark secrets.
Moffat, she was 8.5 months pregnant.
8.5 months.
I want to be a homemaker for animals. I know, right?
You would be the best, Melissa.
You did also get, thank you for bringing us here, of course. And then OJ told you in his book and the Black Special how he did it. He was, yeah. Melissa watched both of the new documentaries. Sky can't look at him or watch the documentary. Just cover half the screen. There you go.
Sky, are you talking about OJ or Scott? Probably Scott, because you followed the case closely. Well, Scott was not quite the devoted husband that he constantly portrayed. Apparently,
I remember Amber Fry like being all pitiful about this. Like, I can't believe her. Sorry.
Yeah. And apparently she was not his first, but she was the one that, was there at the time. As Laci prepared for motherhood,
Susan.
Scott was... Oh, Susan. Hey, Susan, how you doing? According to her mom, she was having terrible mobility problems and hardly walked her dog at that point. Guilty. And yes, Erwin, many husbands are animals.
Most of them.
Melissa. Yeah. So Melissa, maybe that dream can come true. Oh, me. I love some of y'all. Y'all are, we do have some wit on this show. If nothing else, blessings to you all.
True.
Now, Scott was entangled in an affair with this woman, Amber Fry. To Scott, the impending birth of his son was not a joyous occasion. It was a complication. His double life was on the brink of being exposed, and he feared the consequences. So that begs the question, what was Scott willing to do to keep his secrets hidden? On Christmas Eve, 2002, Laci disappeared. Scott claims she had gone on a walk with their dog and never returned. The community was just absolutely shocked. She was obviously well loved in the community. A massive search ensued. There were hundreds, about 900 neighbors, friends in the who scoured the area. You had 30. Initially, you had 30 policemen and firemen on horses, on bicycles, on boats, scouring the area, desperately hoping to find the pregnant mom safe. Days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. Eventually, the search involved over 1,500 people. And I mean, these people were not only scouring the neighborhood and the woodlands around, they were posting flyers all over the surrounding counties. At a press conference, Detective Brochini said police did not believe Laci left voluntarily without even contacting her family. Just this would be completely out of character for her. So from the very beginning,
from what I recall, she and her parents were like super close.
Yeah, from the very beginning, police suspected foul play. They used helicopters, they used canines, everything they had at their disposal, searching the entire region. This is when the case began to attract nationwide media interest. You've got a, girl next door, housewife, pregnant, missing. Nobody knows, just absolutely vaporized. $25,000 reward was offered. It was then increased to $250,000 and then increased to $500,000 for information leading to her safe return or discovery of her whereabouts.
I mean, the poor girl was 5 foot nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, it's not like it would be hard to abduct her, even though, I mean, she was pregnant. That's not really a big deal.
Yeah. And the flip side is, Scott told the police she was out walking the dog. Well,
it sounds like she had preeclampsia
Susan said her mom said she had terrible mobility problems. So if you have, if you're 8.5 months pregnant, and you've got mobility problems, which I think, most people have seen pregnant women who just really, really struggle to get around. Does it make any sense? She'd take the dog and go on a walk up in the mountains or in the neighborhood. Not at all. That's weird from the get-go. So this whole case, started blowing up in the media in January. Remember, she went missing on Christmas Eve. And in the region, it blew up, over the next week or two. You had 1,000 people searching for her. Sky, Nancy Grace brought it to everyone's attention nationwide. Well, not only nationwide, but in that region, the attention grew. You had posters everywhere. You had the local media covering it continuously. And that's at this time, shortly after the search began, Amber Fry informed detectives that she had met Scott, was seeing him. She met Scott on November the 20th, a month basically before Laci went missing. And she told police that on December the 9th, during one of their dates, that Scott told her he was a widower and this Christmas would be the first without his wife.
That's before she ever went missing.
Yes, 2 weeks before she ever went missing. Based on the dates and information that Frey provided, detectives now believe that Scott began planning to kill Laci at least 2 weeks before Laci's disappearance.
Are you going to play this? 'Cause I hope so.
Okay. Hoping Scott would confess or reveal information about his involvement in Laci's disappearance, detectives gave Fry a device with which to record her conversations. Actually,
in Irwin, I think that's another Scott Peterson. There's a cop, Scott Peterson, that was put in jail for, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's a different Scott Peterson. Anyone can do a quick search for me, please, please,
I am
please.
not sure what you're talking about. Isn't it some Innocence Project or some lawyer taking up his case now, seeking another trial? Yes, there
I think
is.
it's
We're about to
him.
get to that. Yeah, it's him.
Oh,
We'll talk about that shortly.
fuck's sake. Okay, sorry. See, I thought it was somebody else. Okay, the Los Angeles. Gotcha. Huh.
All right, I am going to try this and hope the sound comes through. This is one of the recordings of the phone calls that Amber recorded with Scott once she had gone to the police.
Nope. No, no sound.
Can't hear?
Nope.
All right, let me do this. Thank you, StreamYard.
They're really good at that, aren't they?
They are. All right, this ought to work.
That's a scary movie. I think you had mentioned that once before. It was on, well, I think that's why I thought you brought it up. It had been on one time or something. I don't know, that's scary. The whole red rum in the bathtub, that's scary. What? The twins? I really don't want to talk about that movie.
Now, maybe it's just me, but Amber sounds like a 12-year-old girl, and Scott sounds like a demon from hell. Just his voice and the texture of it. As soon as Amber found out he was married, she went to the police. Amazing. He called Amber saying he was in Paris on New Year's Eve when he actually was calling her from Modesto at Laci's vigil. Yep. Also about to get to that. All right, let's continue the recording. That actually was the end. I thought it had a little bit more, but there's a few of those out there if you want to look at them, but they're all kind of the same vein. There's nothing terribly incriminating in those. Now, as Susan already mentioned, in one phone call, apparently he had told Amber he was going out of the country and he was currently in France, in Paris. And he was, talking to her like he was getting fat from all the French food. So it's just kind of,
that's not even a thing.
Weird. No, just the whole thing was kind of weird. Now, 4 months later, in April of 2003, the worst fears were confirmed. The remains of Laci and her unborn son, Connor, were found washed ashore in San Francisco Bay. The discovery was horrifying, to put it mildly. Laci's body had been mutilated. Connor's tiny form was barely recognizable. And obviously that kind of rekindled all the energy and intensity, even magnified it from the previous news cycle and, investigation to try to find her. Suspicion turned to anger, and obviously a lot of it was focused on her spouse, who's usually the first to be suspected. Now, try to, kind of clean up some of the details, but some of this is kind of pertinent to the case put on. The press talking about the state of the bodies. So if you want to mute me for a minute so that you don't hear this part of the discussion.
Trigger warning. I should probably mute you, but it's our show, so I can't.
Well, the press stated that Connor's body had minor decomposition, some mutilations on his right side, and a length of nylon cord wrapped around his body. The source of the mutilations and how the cord became wrapped around his body could not be determined. Laci's body was missing its head, its arms, and its legs, its internal organs, and was severely decomposed. The autopsy revealed that Laci had 2 cracked ribs, and her uterus and cervix were intact. The pathologist testified the missing organs were conditions consistent with a body weighted at the wrist and ankles and submerged in seawater for several months. The doctors concluded Connor had died in utero and his body was expelled from Laci's decomposing corpse. So the discovery of the bodies changed the direction of the case from missing person to a homicide. And it allowed the detectives to expand their investigation into Peterson, obviously as the prime suspect. Now, some interesting things about the case and the prosecution. Scott's behavior in the days following Laci's disappearance was bizarre, to say the least. He sold her car just within days of her missing. He started flirting with women, and he seemed very detached, almost eerily detached from the tragedy. But the most damning evidence came from Amber Fry, who revealed Scott had told the police he was a widower, even before Laci disappeared. What kind of man lies about his wife's death before it happens? Could it have been that Scott planned this all along? When the bodies were found, the FBI and police obviously had grounds to obtain a search warrant and did forensic searches of Peterson's home using a method called mitochondrial DNA testing. The FBI linked a hair wrapped around a pair of pliers found in Scott's fishing boat to hairs recovered from Laci's hairbrush. Police searched Scott's truck, his toolbox, the warehouse. They found a homemade concrete anchor in the boat Scott purchased 2 weeks before he reported Laci missing. Now, Scott told detectives he used a 90-pound bag of concrete to make one boat anchor and then used the rest of the concrete to repair his driveway. Well, when Detective Dodge Hendy actually was his name, searched Scott's warehouse, he found a cement powder on the boat trailer and 5 circular marks matching the size and shape of the bucket used to make the anchor. And what you see here is a photograph, the police photograph of supposedly those 5 circular marks. Now, I have blown the picture up. I've looked at it from different angles. Honestly, I can't see them. But this is what was admitted into evidence. Henley also found a sledgehammer and a dustpan covered with cement powder. You know, if you're pouring and making cement, you know how dust, particularly when you add water or when you pour the powder in, the dust kind of blows up. That's not necessarily uncommon. Well, prosecutors allege Scott made 5 anchors, hence the 5 circular marks as they describe them, tied one of each to Laci's wrist and ankles to sink Laci's body in the bay. After Scott was arrested, they searched San Francisco Bay for the anchors using relatively sophisticated sonogram equipment, which supposedly could identify a tin can, but nothing was found. And part of that is that the bottom of San Francisco Bay is just deep in muck. So if you have something heavy it very likely will sink down into the muck and the sonar would not pick it up anyway. So that is not necessarily conclusive one way or another. So, looking at some of the evidence, supposedly Scott made 5 anchors according to the prosecution, but only one was found, and that in the boat. Now, there is again a site that disagrees with some of the conclusions. List of 10 facts that refute the elements of the prosecution's theory. The prosecution just entered in and said he only owned this boat for a few weeks before Laci's disappearance. Which is true, but Scott owned a boat before that as well. He apparently greatly enjoyed fishing. Secondly, Scott did not research title information on the internet. Detective Wall testified Scott used his home computer to search for boating regulations, for classified ads for boats, and information on fishing, as well as tide charts. Well, apparently he didn't. Prosecution even entered exhibits showing all of Scott's internal searches. None of those were identified as title searches, which is contrary to the testimony entered in by the detective. Scott's search for a boat clearly motivated by an intent to go fishing. Again, Scott enjoyed fishing. The boat was rigged for fishing, had fishing gear all in it, had a little fish detector, all sorts of things. And here's the boat. It's a small little boat with a small motor. If you were trying to conceal a body and you were disposing of it in daylight, this is not the kind of boat you would use. Here is a video done by the defense using the boat with a makeup of Laci's body and the 4 anchors, showing what would happen if you tried to toss it off the boat into San Francisco Bay. Now, there's no sound with this, so, but it is kind of an interesting video. You'll notice how low the boat in the back rides in the water. Let me speed it up a little bit. That's the makeup of her body with the 4 concrete anchors, each one weighing about 35 pounds. Her torso weighed approximately 150 pounds. Scott weighed 175, 180. So that's a lot of weight in this little boat.
Hang on. Stop. Why couldn't he have gone out earlier and put buoys, sunk the anchors down and put buoys on them?
Put buoys on what?
The anchors, so we could see them, and then bring one up at a time or take her down in time.
Why? What advantage would there be in him doing that?
He wouldn't have all that weight on the boat.
Oh. He probably didn't think about it because he didn't
Apparently he'd been planning it for a while.
Practice this. Yeah, but he didn't practice this. If he did it.
I'm just looking at all possibilities.
No, that's fine. It's good. Here is, you can tell already this corner of the boat is almost in the water.
Yeah.
As he's just trying to slide the weights over and put the first weight outside of the boat. There goes one weight. Now water is lapping into the boat. So you get the idea. The boat simply isn't big enough to handle that kind of weight and tossing it over the side.
Well, that's what I'm
Much less
saying.
the difficulty keeping it concealed and doing it during the day with nobody noticing or seeing.
He could have placed them before.
He could have. Yeah. You know, there's probably, like Ellen says, alternative ways to have done this, but it would have taken some practice, some trial and error. And, you know, testimony was entered in that the boat wasn't even in the water before December 24th, which would be after Laci was missing.
He could have hit her.
Sure. There's a lot of things possible. I'm just showing some contrary perspective here.
I'm just being a devil's advocate.
That's fine. Like I say, I can't prove any of this, but it all goes toward reasonable doubt. That's not really the kind of boat I would buy if I wanted to dispose of a body.
No, but we've got some comments here we need to get to.
Yeah. The bodies washed ashore in the same place that Scott said he was fishing on Christmas Eve.
That's true. I've seen that.
Yep. He took her in a boat near Golden Gate and dumped her. Easy case. Body was cut up into pieces so it could be placed in bags in a little boat. Yes, bit a little boat. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Just her torso weighed about 150 pounds, according to police.
Is that before or after
And
it was
if you saw that little video, that was just a torso in the boat, not necessarily the limbs.
It doesn't make any sense for the anchors then, unless he was using them and tied
them to the
buoys to them to keep his boat up while he was doing the thing.
Yeah, the police did take paint samples of buoys in the bay to see if he had tied his boat up to one, because there was a little red paint on one side of the boat, but the paint didn't match any of the buoys in the bay. And it would have had to have been a significant buoy to maintain buoyancy for that boat. Melissa, the really interesting thing about this case is depending upon which side of the coin you're looking at, the same evidence can look very different. Yes, it can. And, you know, that site is the one that pointed out there's really not 5 rings of concrete here, concrete dust. You really can't see it, determine it. It's just not there.
I see a few. I don't see 5.
Well, you see some shapes. This is a straight line, which wouldn't be in a bucket. He used a bucket, a round bucket.
Yeah, like
so
a 5-gallon bucket.
5 concise circles with the concrete dust as you were pouring it in, you poured the water in, settling down the sides. There's not 5 circles. This is straight. This is straight. This is straight. I see linearity. I don't see circularity. This one may be a little circular. It's hard to tell from the angle.
I see it on, is it 25 or 35? Beside 36.
These are 35 right here.
I can see one there. Yeah. Right there.
Yeah, I see a little bit here, but this is linear.
But I see 36 too.
Yeah,
I see a round.
To me is linear.
No, to me it's coming on the other side, but yeah.
This is linear. Again, a little bit of it could, a little bit could be deceiving from the angle we're looking at.
And it's also you're not gonna pick up that. You're gonna scoot it across the table as well.
But you would see the sweep marks as the bucket scraped the concrete dust away, I would think.
Yeah. All right, Susan.
Didn't he tell Laci and his in-laws that he was going golfing that morning? Another lie.
He sure did.
Yep.
I don't, and I'm sorry, I was all kinds of crying a little bit earlier, but I don't understand how somebody can kill an infant. That I can understand how you can kill your wife, but an innocent child just breaks my heart.
I can understand not getting along with somebody. I can understand wanting the divorce, but Yeah, not the murder, particularly of a pregnant woman who's carrying your child.
Who
But
is
again,
viable outside the womb.
he saw the child as a complication, not as a good thing.
I mean, just leave her.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to
The trial was just a media circus.
Mhm.
Cameras, were around, captured every moment as the prosecution, the defense battled it out.
Oh,
The
wow.
prosecution, it's hard to believe, baby, Connor would be 22 years old this year. Yep. Prosecution argued Scott had killed Laci to escape the responsibilities of fatherhood and continue his affair with Amber. Now, I pointed out the baby, Scott saw it as a complication. There's really not much doubt or debate about that.
Sorry.
Now, continuing his affair with Amber, by the time Laci went missing, he had had 4 dates with Amber. Is that really enough to think, hey, I've been out with this chick 4 times. I want to go ahead and murder my wife so I can be with her? I don't know. Now, the prosecution also pointed to his cold, calculated behavior, the lies he told Amber, when he first met her and was going out with her. Here's a picture of his rather jovial mood during the trial.
Yes, Guy. Amber had a daughter. Yeah. Yes, Melissa. Yep.
If you're making concrete anchors applied to kill your wave, why would you leave for that type of evidence so obviously in your workshop? Good question. If you were trying to conceal it, and arguing that you use the concrete in your driveway, well, if you didn't have a new concrete patch, or that concrete would be tested to see if it matched the concrete in the anchor that you had remaining.
She meant wife, not wave.
Yeah. It's just interesting. Just some things again don't fit. The defense conceded Scott was, in their words, a cad. Good British word there.
Meaning?
Cheating, evil person, bad person.
A jackass.
A jackass supreme. Because I've been called a jackass, but I don't think I'm a cad.
Yeah.
I'm biased, but still honest.
Hell, I've called you a jackass. So.
Yep. You are not alone. I've heard that term repeatedly in my life.
I am aware.
But mostly by people who love me.
True.
The prosecution, the defense even argued Scott was a cad for cheating on Laci while she was pregnant. They did ridicule the prosecution's contention that Scott was going to chuck his entire life, chunk everything for a masseuse mistress he had taken on only 4 dates. The defense attorney pointed out or tried to argue that the police had rushed to judgment, noting that the police had discredited Scott's claims that Laci was watching a segment of Martha Stewart on making meringue because the police stated under oath, no meringue was mentioned on the program that morning. Interestingly, defense showed the show from that morning, and yes, it was on making meringue. Now, the prosecution had no evidence linking Scott to the crime. No direct evidence. Prosecutors put out an entirely circumstantial case, which you can convict somebody off circumstantial evidence. I don't argue that, but that's just, another interesting aspect to this case, trial, prosecution. Through various witnesses, the prosecution argued that Scott had several motives for killing Laci. They argued that he was tired of the marriage, that he felt pressure from the pregnancy, that he wanted to continue his affair with Fry, that he was under financial pressure. Which, is any of that really a good motive? I mean, guys, husband are under that kind of pressure all the time. They just go ahead and get a divorce. Just something to consider. One of the prosecution's witnesses, Rodney Oswalt, said that neither of the 2 hair follicles found on Scott's boat belonged to Scott, although he couldn't prove they belonged to Laci. An FBI trace expert matched one of the hairs found in Laci's hairbrush through mitochondrial DNA test to the hair in the pliers, the toolbox on the boat.
Yep, but the mitochondrial is not great evidence, right?
No, a lot of states didn't allow it at this time because of its unreliability, the contestability of it. The prosecution also stated that the hair must have come from Laci's dead body because she had not been seen. She had not seen the boat while she was alive.
That's not true.
That ended up not being true. The defense put on witnesses not only pointing out that the mitochondrial evidence was sketchy, not reliable, but also a witness that's testified she had seen Laci at the warehouse with the boat the day before she was reported missing.
Y'all, my children's father cheated on me when I was 9 months pregnant. I'm glad we didn't have a boat.
On the stand, one of the detectives explained also that in his notes, he had quote unquote excised a witness statement. He had excised that witness's statement from his notes. Yes, excised, cut, removed, deleted the witness stating that Laci had seen the boat. And then the police testified that Laci had not seen the boat under oath.
Moffett, read. Melissa?
I'm so tired of prosecutors only caring about the win and not about justice. And all God's people said, Amen. Yeah, that is a serious issue in our justice system. I mean, I don't know the exact extent of it, but in a lot of cases, we see it time and time and time again. I would hope it would not be that common or prevalent, but we see it far too often.
Yeah, and Melissa, the lies. If people would just be more honest about what they do, what they don't do, what is going on in their lives, the world will be a so much nicer, kinder place. People might get their feelings hurt, but at least it's honest.
Well, another thing too, police lied under oath. Yeah. I wasn't able to find anything where they were punished.
Of course not.
Or imprisoned. It's like, it's just kind of waved off. That to me is more concerning. That almost encourages others to do the same.
And Erwin, our attorney.
Guys do not bother getting a divorce. They take off and disappear or just get out rather than waste money on a lawyer. He was broke, not in good financial shape. Now, I wasn't able to find where he had any financial advantage from Laci's death. I presume there was some insurance, but marginal, minimal. I just didn't see any mention of it.
I mean, he really just wanted easier to kill her than to divorce her because it didn't cost him anything. I mean, he can get divorced pretty cheap.
It would save him
child support.
It would save him alimony and child support.
Yeah.
But And the child was seen as as an inconvenience, so it's fairly easy to say he didn't want to pay for it, pay for the child support.
Okay, here we go.
So he had $15,000 in cash in his car when he was arrested. Yeah, he had emptied out his bank account. And when they arrested him, the indication was he dyed his hair and grew a mustache and was apparently, or the prosecution indicated he was about to head out to Mexico.
He's a putz. Maybe that's a cad. I don't know.
Yeah, same thing. The prosecution, in arguing the concrete didn't match the concrete in the driveway, the chemical analysis didn't show any difference, but they argued that the concrete in the driveway had chunks in it, other chunks of concrete or rock.
Meaning?
Well, the anchors were just pure concrete, no chunks.
Mm-hmm.
So the prosecution was trying to point out that they may be different. Also, the prosecution's title witness under cross, people was mentioned earlier that Laci may have been dumped where Scott said he was fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But on cross-examination, the same witness admitted the estimate was probable, not precise. And by probable, you can think possible was actually indeterminable or impossible to prove. The defense had some different stories as well in terms of what could have happened to Laci. They tried to suggest she was abducted by strangers, and Scott was being unfairly targeted because of the infidelity and how bad they looked. They also tried to poke some.
Isn't it is it Occam's razor?
Occam's, yeah.
Occam's razor, the most, help me.
The most likely case is the most probable.
Yeah, thank you.
But that's not
law, by the way.
That's not proof in a trial.
No, it's not.
Going back to beyond reasonable doubt.
It's just a life thing.
Yeah. The defense tried to obviously poke holes in the prosecution's timeline, suggesting it was impossible for Scott to have committed the crime and disposed of the bodies in the time the prosecution allotted. Where have we seen that before?
Many places, but Murdoch.
Murdoch, yeah. That's probably the greatest example of that. Is it possible that he could have done all that in 10 minutes?
I think it was like 7.
Yeah, 7 minutes.
Hang on. Okay, I heard it was 10,000. It was from the sale of a vehicle to his brother, and then the neighbors were a burglar, and a burnout van containing a mattress blood was found, and they still won't test that DNA. What?
Yeah. Got to comment on that in a minute.
Okay. There's no more beyond reasonable doubt. It's now just common sense. Common sense is missing in the world right now. Like, seriously.
Whoops, there goes Ellen. I did not do it. Defense repeatedly pointed out the lack of evidence tying Scott to the murders, questioned the investigation, both the prosecution's deleted testimony, the lack of recordings. Remember, the prosecution hooked Amber up with a recording device. Well, they forgot to put batteries in it at first. So some of the recordings didn't work. The defense also pointed out there was an extensive investigation of the house and boat and garage, but nothing found. The prosecution's own fertility evidence revealed his estimations were based on a report, a comment by one of Laci's friends, which was hearsay. And the report contained typos. It was just sloppy, lazy work. But that was one of the prosecution's main witnesses. And then there were the mistakes. The main issues highlighted by the defense in the prosecution's case kind of revolved around the handling of the boat, Scott's boat. The prosecution argued was used to dump Laci's body, but the defense claimed the police mishandled the boat by conducting experiments that were not scientifically sound and could have contaminated evidence on the boat. Additionally, the way the boat was stored and transported was criticized. Apparently, the chain of custody requirements and all were not strictly followed. This could have infected the integrity of some of the physical evidence. The search of the Peterson home. The defense pointed out issues with how the search was conducted, claims that the police did not document the search process, potentially missing or even mishandling critical evidence. Questions were raised whether all the evidence came from the home was properly preserved and where some of the items were potentially contaminated. Handling of the bodies. When the bodies of Laci and Connor were found, there were allegations the crime scene was not properly secured. It could have led to contamination or loss of evidence there. Police argued that the defense argued that the police did not protect the crime scene, which could have impacted the forensic evidence. You know, people just going by. Then the dog scent evidence. The prosecution used dogs to try to link Peterson to the location where Laci's body was found. The defense argued this evidence was unreliable and that police did not handle or present it in a scientifically rigorous way.
Well, how long did it take them to do that? Like, it'd have been weeks, right?
No, they got the dogs out within a day.
In that area, though?
Yeah. You just call for a K9 unit and they come by and bring the dog.
Okay.
The dog that was used in the specific event claimed to have detected Laci's scent at Berkeley Marina. Well, this same dog then failed 2/3 of tests with similar conditions. You know, if a dog fails a test 2/3 of the time, can you rely on it to be accurate?
Well, why wasn't it already retired?
It wasn't retired. It was in active service.
I know, but why wasn't it already retired if it was 2/3 wrong?
Don't know. And then the defense also brought up concerns about media influence, jury bias, not directly related to evidence mishandling, which there appears to have been repeated incidents of evidence mishandling.
Mm-hmm.
The defense expressed significant concerns about how media coverage could have influenced the investigation as well as the jury. The intense scrutiny.
They're not supposed to listen to media.
Well, this is all pre-trial.
Yeah, but it should have been voir dire. That's how they handle it. They're not supposed to listen or
not supposed to, but the defense was arguing that they did, and that shaped their view or made them more predisposed to see Scott as being guilty without having an impartial look at the actual evidence.
All right, Jane. Sloppy police work and prosecutorial misconduct can lead to Brady violations. Look what happened with Alec Baldwin. It was dismissed with prejudice. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's really more of a more modern phenomenon. because back in this day, people generally had great confidence in the police and the court process. And, like pointed out, several of the detectives concealed evidence, testified under oath, something did or didn't happen that was untrue. Nothing happened to him.
Yeah, but I mean,
Nothing.
Clay, it's also
The
like
times were a little different then.
if something is now being highlighted in more trials than in the past, it doesn't mean it didn't happen in the past. It just means it's being caught more now than it was in the past.
That's
in
my
my
argument.
opinion. Yeah, okay.
That's my argument, is back then it wouldn't have been investigated as the false testimony, the missing evidence, the contaminated evidence was all just kind of waved on through the system.
Yeah. Sky.
Now, the defense got even a little bit more creative by suggesting that Laci may have been killed by a satanic cult. Ellen's finally happy.
I killed the fruit fly.
Yay. So don't know what the basis for that was.
Sky. Peterson failed a lie detector test by not taking one. True.
Well, a lot of people don't take lie detector tests because they aren't, in a lot of courts, they aren't admissible. It's kind of like the mitochondrial DNA test. It can be unreliable. A lot of it depends on the whimsical interpretation of the operator.
I just committed murder.
Ellen. Thank you.
So if y'all want me to go to jail, I will.
So in the end, the jury didn't buy it. They found Peterson guilty of first and second degree murder. Second was for Connor. He was sentenced to death, a sentence that obviously has been the subject of numerous appeals and legal battles ever since. Interestingly, let me say this. In 2020, the death sentence was thrown out in California. Now, remember, he was convicted in 2004. 16 years later, it was still going through the appeals process. To me, if you want to point out a problem in our judicial system, that's a big one right there. 16 years of appeals for a murder case. I'm thinking
double murder.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's wrong. Both in terms of delaying, if he's innocent, delaying his opportunity for retrial and reexamination of the case. If he's guilty, delaying the execution of justice. But 16 years in the court system, that's insane, my opinion. Now, interestingly, in March of this year, Scott attended a status hearing in Redwood City that had been granted by a San Mateo judge in response to a request by the LA Innocence Project, which somebody alluded to earlier.
Yeah, Melissa.
It's a nonprofit legal organization that accepted Peterson's case 2 months prior. So he was convicted in 2004, given the death penalty, and the Innocence Project just took a look at the case 2 months in January of this year. Interesting timeline. Well, the project filed an additional suit claiming it had new evidence from the trial, which supported Peterson's claims of innocence. The new evidence they were trying to introduce was, as Melissa said, a van and a mattress. There was a van set on fire near the Peterson home on December 25th, Christmas Day, the day Laci went missing, or the day after if you think it was Christmas Eve. And it contained a blood-stained mattress. Now, the the LA Innocence Project claims this van could be linked to Laci's abduction after she potentially witnessed the burglary. And the Innocence Project has asked for DNA testing on the mattress, as it was not fully examined during the original investigation. The Innocence Project is also seeking new DNA testing on the duct tape found on Laci's remains, which could provide further insights. They argue that technological advances in DNA testing could produce new evidence that was previously unavailable or unreliable. The prosecution, a month or two later, responded with, all of this is unnecessary. The DNA has all been done before. So this is still under consideration. Haven't seen a determination yet. So where are they now? Scott remains in prison. Though his death sentence was commuted in 2020, the courts ruled that there were issues with the selection process. The judge removed jurors who were opposed to capital punishment. So Scott is now serving life in prison without parole. Laci's family, particularly her mother, Sharon Rocha, has been a vocal advocate for victims' rights, trying to ensure that Laci and Connor are not forgotten. And, you know, some of you may be aware, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the extent, but there have been a number of movies and books on this case, on this event. I was kind of surprised how many there were. There's like 40. Almost all the major channels, USA, E, Discovery, Crime, Podcast, Dateline. Dateline had a 2-hour special. Oxygen Channel, ABC, A&E, Dr. Phil, 2020, Netflix, Peacock, Nancy Grace, all had shows, movies on this crime. So, you know, what do you think? Guilty, or are you at the point where not really beyond a reasonable doubt?
Guilty.
You would vote to convict, knowing the lies that the prosecution told, concealing evidence, the lack of direct evidence tying him to the murder?
Let's call it women's intuition. Maybe because a year before I was in the situation where my husband was cheating on me while I was pregnant. But
that doesn't make him guilty of murder.
I know. I shouldn't be on the jury.
And that's the issue.
Yep.
Jane, lie detector tests aren't admissible in court. They are not. I have questions. I'm with you, Melissa. I do too. Again, you know, I think he probably did it, but I can't prove it. And if I can't prove it, if there's no direct evidence, I mean, with DNA testing has evolved to a huge hammer. It's hard to avoid DNA evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no DNA evidence linking him to the murder. Now, was he callous? Did he not want the baby? Did he maybe want to continue with Amber, even though they'd only been out 4 dates? All of that's probably true, but none of that is conclusive that he committed murder. And this is a guy that had led a pretty clean life, no criminal history. You know, does somebody all of a sudden turn from a good, you know, well-natured person with no anger issues, no history of crime, no history of violence, into a murder because he'd rather not pay child support? You know, I think the debate Tuesday night, we should watch it together. Which one? There's 40 of them out there.
No, the debate.
Oh, yeah, between Trump and Harris.
Kamala. And guilty.
You know, we might, that might not be a bad idea to watch it together. What time does it start?
Usually around 8 Eastern, but I'm not sure.
Okay. We'll do that. We may start a little later.
Mm-hmm.
We will probably a little. Yeah, we'll announce it. We'll post it on the community board. So keep an eye on there. Also, if you're watching, if you could give us a like, subscribe if you haven't.
It really helps.
It does. We appreciate your support very much.
And if you're here and you're
Whoops,
watching or you're on replay and you haven't hit subscribe, it costs you nothing, but it helps us tremendously. You have no idea. So please, please, please. And comment.
Also, if you have any questions you'd like to see followed up on or addressed, email me at moffatonmoney@gmail. Follow on Twitter, Moffat on Money. Again, appreciate your support. Jane, how many other women do you think he had, but they just didn't come forward? I doubt Amber was his first. In fact, I'm pretty certain she's not, but I have no idea how many. Still guilty. Circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. It's significant.
I'm with you.
But to me, when the police lie and are concealing evidence, that's pretty damn huge in terms of my willingness to call a mistrial.
Or your fuckery radar?
Yeah. Yeah.
Debate probably not. No. Usually it's like 8 Eastern, right?
Well, let's see. Let me take a minute here.
I'll have to take a nap. Come on. Or sleep super late.
Let's see. Well, it's telling me all sorts of stuff, everything but the time. 8 p.m. Eastern.
See?
So we'll wait a minute. This says 9 p.m. Eastern Tuesday.
Well, which one?
I don't know. We'll post it on the community page, and we may start, we may just delay and start till 8, see if the debate comes on at 9. We'll go a little long, or we'll be here, but we'll have a little discussion before.
Oh, Lord. Here we go.
So.
Oh, she was. I forgot about that. Yep.
Yeah, she was. Many drug traffickers acquitted in California under her reign.
Mm-hmm.
That might be something interesting to look at, because there's, for example, there's a individual convicted of murder where some of the evidence was concealed or faked, and he was later acquitted. But as he was being found guilty, he said Kamala looked at him and laughed. And obviously he doesn't support her.
Well,
while she was AG. Do what?
I've seen the thing where I've seen the interview where she was like, yeah, just with a stroke of a pen.
Yep. She can, ruin people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Also, while she was AG, a court ordered her to release people convicted and being held in prison of misdemeanor crimes, like, first-time marijuana offenses. And she refused. She delayed, and she said because California needed the labor to help take care of the highways and, mow the grass, that kind of thing. So she basically was arguing the state of California could use slave labor at its convenience and whimsy.
See,
some interesting aspects to her reign.
Yeah. I've seen so many people just say just because she's a female and just because she was thrown on the ticket doesn't mean that she deserves it. And I kind of agree with that. Yeah. And I've got some friends who will vote for her, and these are affluent, I would call them, people. And I'm like, how in God's name can you possibly vote for her? I don't know.
Yeah. Not going to get into all of that, but there's some interesting aspects to her term, her campaign, which deserve proper scrutiny, deserve questions being asked, and deserve answers. And we're not getting good answers. And that to me is a problem.
That's a huge problem.
So,
All right, past my
Anybody-
bedtime.
anybody have any questions? I tried to kind of hustle through this because I had a fair amount to cover, but I hope it didn't rush through
Yeah, you
it too
did.
fast. I tried.
You did good.
Anybody have any questions? Again, if you think
I
of
do.
something after the show is over, email me. Yes, ma'am.
When's the
What
debate?
question?
When's the debate?
Well, I'm going to have to go
I
to
know.
several sites to try to figure that out.
It was so great to have you here, Susan.
It was good to see you again, Susan. Erwin, always. Jane,
Good to see you,
Sky,
Jane, Sky.
Melissa.
Yep.
Uh,
All of
those
our
of you
people.
who, yep, those are the family. Those who are watching have not commented. We would love to have your input, your comments, so we can say, hey, get to know you. But appreciate you watching. Those on the replay crew, we love you guys. Thank you for watching and for your support.
I have another fruit fly. I'm not happy.
All right. As Ellen tries to commit a double murder again tonight, we will let you guys go. Appreciate
Love you
y'all
guys.
very much.
Night, night.
Love you.
Sweet
Look
dreams.
forward to seeing you Tuesday for the debate, and we'll have some fun then too.
Merci
Y'all,
beaucoup.
blessings to you. Y'all finish out a great weekend. Thank you. Our time is up. We thank you for yours.